In a world where rogue boosters can basically do anything they want to get players to go anywhere they need to go, isn't there somebody that's supposed to look out for the little guy or at least protect the program? Who is it? Let's talk about that right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day, maybe even your second listen if you're listening to this as an afternoon episode after checking out this morning's show. Welcome back to my everydayers. Happy Wednesday if I'm seeing you for the first time. We got a fun one for you today, digging into the House settlement, what we have so far, what is the latest updates, and a couple other things that are connected to this with collectives in buyouts. Then we have a trade happening in the college athletic scheme. Really, is it a trade? And then we're going to talk about some eliminations of rules happening across the NCAA. Before we dig into that, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. Well, the House settlement is something that should have been done, hasn't been done as of today. Heading into right now as we sit on April 23rd. Shout out, happy birthday to my brother, by the way. It is April 23rd. The NCAA House settlement is it going to be, which will be a landmark $2.8 billion agreement across all of college athletics, is yet to be approved. Waiting for the final approval from U.S. District Judge Claudia Wilken. This settlement is going to, something that started all the way back in October, is going to change college athletics as we know it. I don't know else how to put it lightly. It's going to put a nuclear bomb on college athletics. The entire landscape of college athletics as we have seen it for our entire lives, even though it's changing drastically over the last 5 years, is going to drastically change again. And the biggest things that come from this, the revenue sharing is probably the biggest portion. And with the schools can distribute up to $20.5 million. That's the cap that they're going to start off with annually to student athletes. And it's going to make a certain amount of shift in the cap later on in upcoming years. But the cap starts at $20.5 million. It's also something that a lot of people don't talk about. This is that $2.8 billion, which is crazy that it's not being talked about enough. But there's a lot of back pay, approximately that, almost $3 billion about compensation for athletes who competed from 2016 and on, talking about NIL. And that's where that whole NIL thing comes into play. And the NIL oversight, there's going to be a lot more oversight, going to take care of third parties. There's going to be anything that exceeds over $600 must be reported and will be reviewed by a third party clearinghouse for fairness and compliance. Screams like the opportunity to have a lot more of things under the table, right? Bringing you back to those whole SMU days, if you will. And then, of course, the whole roster limits, and we're seeing it being a big deal, especially right now in college football, moving to the 105 limit about college players going to that cap. We're seeing players enter the portal because of the unknown of if they're going to make the 105 or not. And right now that is not confirmed, but when the NCAA brought back their changes for Judge Wilken, the roster size did not change. So it looks like that is going to happen. So we're getting a whole bunch of things about the provisions, the key provisions of the settlement, if you will. Nothing is set in stone as of right now, but that's what it's looking like. And the reason I set the groundwork for this, about this revenue sharing, is obviously we're still waiting on the final hearing. When we do, we're going to have some drastic changes. And for Kansas State side, we didn't have that many players leave in the portal, at least not yet, right? There's maybe a couple days left in the portal, and there are not that many players who have left. Before the portal started, I was counting around 125 players, maybe a couple less. Let's just say 122. And I'm only counting about 4 or 5 players entering the spring transfer portal window for Kansas State. That's a big deal. meaning that there's going to be some players who are just going to get cut and not have an opportunity to go elsewhere. Is that what that means? Because they didn't enter the portal? I mean, obviously that's going to be a big issue anyways, right? Like, can they really stop you from going to another school? We saw that in the past as well. One of the biggest things we saw in the past was a defensive back from Wisconsin, Xavier Lucas, who decided to have his NIL contract bought out and go to Miami, even though he didn't enter the portal and decided to leave anyways because Wisconsin wouldn't let him enter the portal. And there was nothing that they could do. So maybe we'll see a lot of players also doing that. It's going to be a mess. That's what I'm trying to get at here. It's going to be a mess. So who looks out for the little guy? And what I mean by that is we're at this point right now with the NILs and the collectives and everything like that. And for the majority of it, I would say, and I'll just put out a number here, and I would feel good about saying this number, 95% of all the folks who are in collectives trying to just do things for their program are in good faith. And that actually might be a low number. It's probably higher than 95%. It's usually a couple bad apples that ruin it for everybody else, right? But let's just use 95% for the sake of this exercise that I'm about to have here. And I would say 95% of those people are in good faith to make your program better. You want to do everything possible to just up the glory of your program, to find them into a national championship contender, bring players to your school, your community, everything, you name it, right? Everything that comes with NIL. Because let's be honest, when it is utilized correctly, I have seen this at way many different levels. I had the opportunity, I got out of the military just a few years ago. I've lived all across the country. I've lived in the Tidewater community. I've lived in San Diego. I've lived in the Great Lakes region. I've lived all the way in Hawaii. You name it, I've been all over the place. I have seen this type of portion for how college athletics impacts communities of different shapes and sizes. While I was out of the military, right now I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm seeing it happen as well. I've wrote for many different sporting outlets. I've wrote for many different teams. I've covered and worked for many different organizations. I've seen this happen at all spectrums and sizes. When it's used properly, it's amazing. When you see a quarterback for a G5 team get sponsorships and NILs from ma and pa restaurants, and they go in on a Tuesday night for trivia because that's their NIL deal, or maybe strike a 30-second commercial that's played on the local news at 11 o'clock p.m. Like, those things are really, really cool. But is that what's always happening? Not right now. Not really. And what I'm getting at is striking right on back to that whole situation that happened with Tennessee, with Nico Iamaleava, and put it right in his last name, Iamaleava. He's going to leave. And not only him, but now his brother, Madden, both entered the transfer portal and are heading to UCLA. Nico from Tennessee goes to UCLA on a much less deal. And his brother, a freshman who committed to Arkansas just this past window in the wintertime, decided to enter the spring portal, wasn't even there for enough to catch a cup of coffee, and is going to follow his brother back to where they're from, the Long Beach area, into UCLA. Why is that a problem? Why do I use that as a problem, this scenario? Because it goes back to the whole thing that I was kind of talking about earlier on this morning's episode. But it's the 5%. It's those rogue boosters that are giving this bad advice, that are making the college sport have to push to these type of aggressive patterns, aggressive measures, to make sure that there is either a unified portion of NIL or some sort of system. If it wasn't for that 5%, now hear me out. I know where I'm getting here. It's something that you can obviously not get rid of the outliers. I get it. But if it wasn't for those 5%, would we have to go down this road? Would we have to go on Capitol Hill to do these settlement hearings to get this regulation with NIL? Would we have to do that? Would it still be needed because there are obviously richer collectives, the Grove in the SEC, like, is it something that you would still have to do because of competitive balance? Greg Sankey of the SEC, and always love hearing from him, right? As I say with our sarcastic tone on this Wednesday afternoon, talks about how, of course, the SEC is in a terrible spot, right? When it comes to this type of thing, always likes to play the victim, which is wild for all the things that are handed to his conference. One of the quotes he said as he spoke at the World Congress of Sports on Tuesday in Nashville, question came up about how schools, among other things, this is from Ben Portnoy, by the way, on Twitter. One of the questions that came up said, how can schools, among other things, enforce contracts mid this transactional period? Talking about contracts of players. And the reason that he brings this up is because with Madden, the brother of Nico, who's leaving Arkansas's athletic director has determined that he wants to enforce buyouts, NIL buyouts, after that player left in the transfer portal, because this buyout is taking a lot of money, right? Nico from Tennessee was set to make $2.4 million at Tennessee. Now, I don't know the number from Madden that's not pushed out, but it must be high enough of a number for an SEC school like Arkansas to make a big deal out of this, especially their athletic director, Hunter Yurchek, sending a clear message how the Razorbacks will handle NIL buyouts in the future, saying they will enforce them. So obviously must have been a big enough thing. But Greg Sankey said, and this was directly because of the Madden situation, said, quote, "You're seeing now over and over the issues of contract law that are on full display now. What are the second and third order effects? Legal minds can debate that." And this one I thought funny here. One of the realities now is that anybody with a law degree and a Twitter account is like an expert. They can put something out and I'll have a university president send it to me. It doesn't mean it's right. It's an opinion. You go back and you're going to deal with issues around agreements that are signed and they're enforceable in this environment. Are they enforceable under the law? And that's to be determined. So obviously that looks like that's going to be a new battle that they're going to face, something that'll be completely different from this settlement. But it sounds like there's going to be somebody looking out against these, dare I say, rogue outliers, or these collectives, making calls behind the backs of teams, trying to get them to leave the portal for another bag after they've already committed somewhere else. I'm actually for this. And although I like to give as much crap as I possibly can towards the SEC and everything like that, I'm actually for this because it goes towards the pillars of what I love about college football, with the tradition, the rivalry, the fans, if you will. It's the closest we have right now. The closest to a gatekeeper that we have is athletic directors finding the way to say enough is enough. And finally putting their foot down and saying, we will give you this name, image, and likeness, this package, coming over, commit to us. But if you leave, you're going to have to pay it back. There will be a buyout or whatever portion that will be. It's not just yours. It's not the, hey, welcome, come on in. Oh, and by the way, you're leaving at brunch. Oh, phooey, we gave you $1 million. That sucks. Enjoy UCLA. It's not going to happen. And of course, that makes a lot of sense for programs, especially ones that don't have a lot of financial stability. Not saying that Arkansas and the SEC doesn't have that, but it means a lot. And that's going to be something that is completely going to impact Kansas State in the future. Right now, we're not seeing that because we have a stable quarterback. But after Avery, who says that doesn't happen? There is a possibility. Now, there's some great backup quarterbacks on Kansas State's roster right now. But for this exercise, let's say that doesn't pan out. What do you do after that? Let's finish that thought right after this, right here on Locked On Kansas State. Today's episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. No, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch Money, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget much smarter, save more. Thank you, Monarch Money, for your help. So take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We are growing every single day. We're bringing you multiple episodes here for the rest of the week as we just blast through this month of April, because there's just way too much to talk about. Before we went to the break, I was talking about the fact of how this could impact Kansas State in the near future with the settlements, the collectives, the buyouts, if you will. We didn't have anybody huge leaving the transfer portal this winter. That was a huge concern. After starting 7-1, having a disappointing finish, not counting the Rate Bowl, if you will, but just going to the Rate Bowl instead of the college football playoffs is considered disappointing after starting 7-1. There was a real feeling heading into the portal that maybe a certain amount of players, especially on the talent level, skill position groups, would test the transfer portal. Dylan Edwards came up. Jace Brown came up as a potential. And although, there was a possibility of Jace Brown before the bowl too, there was all these rumors happening before the bowl game. He kind of squashed it beforehand, but you know how that goes on social media, right? I think it's a good thing overall that we felt that way, because we knew how important they were to the team. But overall, that concern was still there because we knew it was a possibility. So let's play another exercise as we're on this nice Wednesday afternoon and we're in the world of hypotheticals, right? We already talked with the SEC on this episode, so why don't we go ahead and play hypotheticals? They love to do that. Let's say once Avery Johnson declares to the NFL draft in a few seasons and is picked up in the first round and go ahead and takes care of his next step being a starting quarterback in the NFL, because that's bound to happen. There's no doubt about that. The next quarterback at Kansas State is not on this roster, let's say, just for the sake of this exercise. Because as I mentioned, I love the quarterback room at Kansas State. But let's say that there is not a feasible option for you to continue to have a successful team in Manhattan after Avery Johnson departs. What do you do? Do you do the exact same thing that we're seeing some of these programs do right now with the quarterback troubles? I'm telling you that Kansas State will be in the college football playoffs this season. They will be in contention and will be in the Big 12 championship game this season. If they're going to do it this year, there's to me, I think that's going to be a perennial thing. Kansas State has the opportunity, the way they are built right now, they just bring in one of their best recruiting classes in the history of the program. It's not slowing down. So whether Avery stays for 1 or 2 more seasons, let's say for the sake and just for the love of the fact of having him as our quarterback, let's say for 2 more years, he's your quarterback. When he leaves, every other position is probably in good shape. So you're probably in the same boat that Tennessee is in right now, that Nico left when Avery declares for the draft. Now Avery's not going to do what Nico did. He's going to just run out of eligibility. But you're in this situation where you have to go get a quarterback. Are you going to push really hard and spend a bunch of money? What if that player accepts it and then in the next portal window decides to leave? You going to enforce a buyout? You absolutely have to. You absolutely have to. You have to protect your assets, especially at this new settlement case that's coming up. There's going to be a cap on the roster. You got to find a way to secure your program any way you possibly can. Because with this new settlement hearing, although there are going to be regulations, I think coaches and athletic directors are going to feel like they actually don't have as much pull or as much as control as they once did. I think it's going to be a double-edged sword. I think we are going to find a lot of problems with this settlement, with these new rules coming in. Speaking of rules, they're about to eliminate a bunch of them. Over 150 long-standing rules with the NCAA. Let's dig into that as we wrap up this show right here on Locked On Kansas State. Welcome back to the show, Locked On Kansas State. Do me a favor, click that subscribe button. We are bringing you Kansas State coverage every single day. Whether it's talking about the Big 12, talking about college football, or college athletics as a whole, we're making sure that you are not only the most informed Kansas State fan, but college athletics fan out there. Because when you're at a bar right now, or at a restaurant, or at a family reunion, and you're wearing the Power Cat, and someone asks you a question, you're going to know. And that's because you listen to Locked On Kansas State. We're talking about, everything under the sun on this Wednesday. Earlier today, we talked about things with house settlements, collectives, buyouts. You name it, right? The trade. We had an official trade, right, with Tennessee and Nico going to UCLA. Well, UCLA's quarterback goes to Tennessee. They call it a trade. It's not a trade. I know the word official is probably the worst word to use, but are we going to see more of that? Is that going to happen? Where coaches are going to call it and be like, hey, this player doesn't fit. Let's swap. That's not what happened, but can you see trades happening in college football? They want to try and do everything like the NFL. That would be the next step, wouldn't it? That'd be bizarre. That'd be absolutely bizarre. Moving on, though, there are a long-standing bunch of rules, 153 of them, according to this new report coming out by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports and Heather Dinich of ESPN. 153 long-standing rules are set to be deleted, removed from the NCAA Division I handbook that'll allow the schools to share more financial benefits directly with the players. The biggest addition, the biggest kind of take-all from this is from the same topic we're discussing today. Proposes new rules to allow direct payments to the players. Now, this could be something that was to help with the approval from the House settlement. It could just be another step towards the new era of how we view amateurs in college athletics. But either way, that's a lot. 150-something rules. Now, a lot of them, again, are towards the payment of players, helping with name, image, and likeness, the way that colleges were able to either see NIL deals or not, be able to have some sort of say, things like that. According to the report on ESPN, NCAA board members met for about 4 hours on Monday and emerged with 9 major proposed legislative changes, which included permission for schools to provide direct financial payments to players, including their NIL. So they're trying to take this sweeping change by July 1st. And again, it's also about if the settlement is approved. Schools will have until June 15th to decide whether to opt to provide benefits that would be permissible under the settlement for the coming academic year. So they're trying to put some sort of date on this. And I think those dates are going to line up pretty well with what we hear from the settlement hearing as well. June 15th, July 1st, as we sit here at the beginning of May. That date kind of sounds right. We're probably going to finish all of this hearing. I would not be surprised if the final day of the changes that will become effect July 1st sounds pretty right. So it would not surprise me whatsoever. And these are such some interesting rules. They're really interesting to put it lightly. And Ross Dellinger kind of put a graphic out of some of these legislative changes, and some of them are talking about financial aid, eliminates team scholarship limits for institutions and allows institutions that provide student athletes with settlement-related benefits. It talks about benefit cap managements, name, image, and likeness activities is a big one. There's a lot of different things that they're going to talk about. The biggest thing that I saw, though, is not only these rules, because that was something that came out big with the NCAA. Again, the direct payment to players, that goes right in with this settlement thing. So it kind of makes sense that they are trying to get their handbook in line with the new settlement, basically trying to make sure that once this settlement is approved, there are no other things in their way. I think they're trying to count all their chickens right off the bat. So we'll see if that benefits them, right? We'll see if that helps as well. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it will, but maybe it will. Maybe it will. There's one more thing to report on today. Ross Dellinger brought it up as well. This came from actually Brian Murphy, the sports investigate reporter. I found him on Twitter at MurphSturf. Nice handle. Says a North Carolina judge does not grant injunction for a couple Duke and North Carolina football players who were seeking additional years of eligibility. The NCAA yesterday denied waivers for 3 Duke players, and waivers for UNC JJ Jones is pending. This report came on Tuesday, so the waivers were denied on Monday. Several judges have sided with the NCAA recently in eligibility cases. So that makes you wonder if they are going to continue to do that with this eligibility thing. I think that is probably the best route, because what we saw from this whole Diego Pavia case that really started this all at Vanderbilt, opening up a can of worms of eligibility because of the JUCO route. If you continue to let this happen, and I'm all for it if you played at a different level, right? Sure. And this is like the weirdest group of college athletics in the world right now that's ever played, because of the COVID year and the fact that they've had limited recruiting, and then you have new people coming in dealing with the extra year, the super senior. I mean, you can go down the line. It's been a weird cycle. If you would just take the last, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior class of college athletics right now. So I understand why a lot of these college athletes are trying to get an extra additional year, because they feel like they've been screwed out of it. But I think you have to draw the line somewhere. And I think these judges are finally seeing it. I would like to see, and I haven't seen this in the settlement case, so I don't think it's something that is part of it, because it is more about the back pay for the NIL and things like that. But I'd like to eventually see some sort of, if we're going to go down this route of legislative laws from the NCAA and from governing bodies, if you will, them to make a official eligibility thing once again. I felt like we had that for a long time. 4 years in the red shirt, the very few medical red shirts that were approved by the NCAA. Now it seems like it's all over the place. It is very hard to determine who has eligibility left. It is very hard. So, I mean, we have a player, Taylor Potier, who is going to play again this season and has been here as long as Chris Kleiman has, which I'm glad he's here, by the way. He's apparently in the best shape of his life. So I hope that something changes in the near future. We got a lot more to talk about on this week. NFL draft coming up. Hopefully we have some good news from some recruiting path, some news that could possibly come out tonight. We'll keep you covered, of course, here on Locked On Kansas State. And I thank you for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen today. Real technically, your second listen if you're listening this afternoon. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. As your favorite collegiate players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.